Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Backlog Bunker. This week we're talking about Mega Man again, because, again, I've just been playing a lot of Mega Man. And since I was busy this last weekend, I did make a bunker, and in the time since the bunker previous, I've beaten Mega Man's 3, 4, and 5. This week I mostly want to talk about 5, so to understand my thoughts about 3 and 4, all you really need to know is that for 3, it was my favorite Mega Man up to that point because I actually had fun with it, God forbid, with its especially standout feature being the addition of both Rush and the slide, because I think the game uses the slide really well, which I think is a pretty remarkable accomplishment given the fact that most series that add a new mechanic to a franchise do not pull it off nearly as well as Mega Man 3 does. Then on the complete opposite side, Mega Man 4 also adds a new mechanic, and it does not pull it off nearly as well as Mega Man 3 does, surprise surprise. And then, what I would call the overarching theme between both Mega Man's 3 and 4 are, well, two things, honestly. The first can really apply to the whole series up until this point, but it applies more to 3 and 4 specifically, because those games are, for the most part, good, leading up to what is this first thing, which is the ending of both games, where after you do the Robot Master stages, the games fall off pretty hard after you do all of that. The second theme, and the far more relevant one in regards to this video, is that starting with Mega Man 3 and being reinforced by Mega Man 4, the series is finally starting to find what we would call a groove. The outline established in 3 is what ends up being the general feel for what comes after, which is why now I get to talk about my favorite Mega Man game up to this point, which is Mega Man 5. I believe this is because, now that the series has found what's generally considered to be its average for quality, it can only really go up from here when they refine the mechanics, because 5 is just a better version of everything you can find in both 3 and 4. And I don't just mean general gameplay loop either, like, the platforming is 3's but better, and the stages are 4's but better. No, in some cases there are, literal improvements from things that you can find in those games. Like, for example, when it comes to Robot Master powers, your version of the shield power-up this time around is the Star Shield, and unlike both the Skull and Leaf shields, it actually works like a shield, and you can use it when you want. Crazy idea, I know. One of Mega Man 3's more interesting ideas was Top Man's power, which was, unlike most of them, a melee attack. And the idea is supposed to be that it's a melee attack with invincibility frames, but only a small window of invincibility frames, so that when you actually use it, you have to time it well to be able to make the best use of it. Unfortunately, Top Man's power fucking sucks, and 5's version of it is Charge Man, where instead of a melee attack that you have to be able to hit and then back away from, it instead replaces your slide with your melee attack. And while it's still not perfect, because I don't like having to do the slide input to be able to actually attack, it still works far better than Top Man's power, because if you space Charge Man's power appropriately, you're always going to end up being invincible throughout the duration of the slide. Crazy idea, I know. And while Mega Man 5, again, like the previous games, has a weaker ending in its second half than its first half, unlike the previous games, the second half is still pretty good. The best version of a second half that any Mega Man game has had so far before 5 was the very first stage of 3's second half. Again, 5 doesn't exactly hit a bullseye because the bosses are still pretty weak, but the stages being consistently good is a win that I will take, especially since some of the bosses aren't even that bad, especially compared to 4's final stages bosses. Hell, 5 is the best Wily machine so far, in that it isn't fucking bullshit. I do think it's a little bit too easy, but I will take 10 too easy Wily machines than one Wily machine that puts me in an unwinnable situation. I say all this to say, I am very happy with Mega Man 5, especially coming off of the previous 4 Mega Mans. Which brings me to my weekly topic, which I'll admit is cheating a little bit, which is why I play games in release order. Or I guess to frame it more as an argument, why you should play games in release order. Honestly, there's quite a few, but the one that's relevant to what we've talked about today is mechanical progression. Did I like playing Mega Man 1 or 2? Not necessarily, no, but having played Mega Man 1 or 2, I then got to play 3, a game that I ended up liking, and 4, a game I ended up being fine with, and 5, a game that I would say I really like. Now, it's not like I had to play Mega Man 1 or 2 to be able to play Mega Man 3 or 5 next, but the fact of the matter is, I don't know if I would have liked Mega Man 1 or 2. Even if someone had recommended to me to play Mega Man 5 and I enjoyed it, I still would have wanted to go back to eventually play Mega Man 1 or 2 because they're in the same series as a game that I like. But in that scenario, if I played 5 first, I'd be going back to mechanically inferior versions of that same game. No slide, worse robot powers, worse stages, all that kind of stuff. And now imagine an even worse version where I started with the X series, and all the advancements those games made, and then going back to the classic Mega Mans. So basically, I see it like this. There's 2 different universes. One in which I play all the Mega Mans starting with 1, and another in which I play all the Mega Mans starting with 5, I guess. In either universe, I don't like Mega Man 1 or 2. However, in the universe where I start with Mega Man 1 and 2, I eventually just play the games more and more until I start liking them more and more. Whereas if I start with Mega Man 5, I play a game that I like, and I only get to sour on them more as I play games that I don't. The only exception I've ever had to the release order rule is when the creators in question say that you can play a prequel as the first one. The example I always go to is Yakuza, where Ryuga Gotoku said that 0 can be played as the first one in the games, and then, you play the Kiwamis, and then 3, and then 4, and so on and so forth. Though, maybe not 3 anymore. However, even in Yakuza's case, I would still advocate for playing in release order because the games do change mechanically from game to game, and going from the chronological order, especially with the most recent releases of those games, makes things really, really confusing. Or at least jarring gameplay-wise. Going in chronological order, 0 and Kiwami 1 play like each other, but then Kiwami 2 plays entirely differently to them without any style switching. Then 3, 4, and 5 don't play like any of the games before them, but 5 feels somewhat like 0. But then 6 plays like Kiwami 2, but since 6 released before Kiwami 2, is actually a worse and more primitive version of all the mechanics you've already used. Now that Kiwami 3 is on the way, it might make the jump from 2 to 3 easier, but in between the release of Kiwami 2 and 3 were at least 5 games of advancements to the action formula, including the reintroduction of style switching, meaning that Kiwami 2 players will actually have no styles to Kiwami 3 styles back to no styles again with 4. I say all of this to say, release order makes mechanical familiarity way more intuitive. So even if I wouldn't call myself a fan of those early Mega Man games, I'm still glad that I played them because it led me to enjoying 5 as much as I did, and appreciating it as much as I did. And so if there's anything you take away from what I say today, let it be that you need to play these things in release order. Please. That's it. Get out of here.